I always thought funerals were supposed to bring families together. Ours did the opposite. When my grandfather, Leonard Vexley, the man whose name built half of Manhattan, passed away, everything that held our family together went with him. The ceremony was perfect on the outside. Polished marble floors, soft string music, black umbrellas lined like soldiers. But underneath, it was a war zone. You could hear it in the whispers: inheritance, assets, power, control. Everyone wanted a piece of him, even in death. Everyone except me. I was the family disappointment, the one who didn't belong, the writer, the quiet one, the one who refused to use the Vexley name as a weapon. My cousins, Grant and Evelyn, never let me forget that. They carried the Vexley arrogance like a crown. Every smile was a threat, every laugh a blade. To them, I was a smudge on the family portrait, something they couldn't erase, but would never acknowledge. After the funeral, we gathered in the marble lounge of the Vexley estate, a room that looked more like a museum than a home. Chandeliers so bright they hurt your eyes, paintings of ancestors staring down from the walls, judging us in their silence. Every inch of that place screamed wealth, power, legacy, but not love. Never love. My mother sat beside me, hands trembling, staring at the floor. She hadn't said much since the burial. Leonard was her father, but he treated her more like a business partner who'd failed to deliver. She'd left home young, married my father, a man Leonard called a nobody, and for that she was exiled. I guess I inherited that exile. When the lawyer arrived, you could feel the room tighten. Mr. Harland, tall, cold, with silver hair so neat it looked like it hurt. He carried a single brown envelope and a metal briefcase. No emotion, no sympathy. Just business. His daughters couldn't bear the sight of weakness. Too messy. Too real. Clara, my wife, claimed she was drowning in meetings. Her sisters were busy with their families. None of them could spare time for the man who had built the life they all flaunted. So it was me, Daniel Hayes, who sat by his bedside, feeding him, changing sheets that smelled of medicine and fading pride. At first, I did it out of obligation. But duty has a way of reshaping itself when you spend long nights in silence with a dying man. He began to talk to me, not as a son-in-law, but as a man who had built and lost, who knew the loneliness of being surrounded by people who loved what he gave them, not who he was. He spoke of the company, the good years, the betrayals, the boardroom vultures who smiled as they sharpened their knives. He spoke of mistakes, of trust misplaced in blood. And one night, as rain whispered against the window, he said softly, almost to himself, "They'll sell everything the moment I'm gone. You're the only one who still sees me." I didn't answer, but I never forgot. When Edward passed, grief in that house became performance art. Clara cried when people were watching. Her sisters posted poetic captions online, as if hashtags could manufacture sincerity. Even at the funeral, the tears were rehearsed, perfect, public, hollow. I stood back, silent, as their cameras clicked beside the coffin. The priest's voice blurred into the background hum of fake grief. That's when I found the voicemail. "Dad's gone. Finally. Maybe now we can sell that useless company and move to Dubai." That night, I sat by my apartment window, the city lights flickering below like dying stars. I turned the envelope over in my hands, again and again. It didn't feel like a gift, felt like a test, or maybe a riddle. The next few days blurred. I packed without thinking. Maybe part of me hoped there was a reason behind it, something deeper. Or maybe I just needed to know what kind of man would leave his grandson a plane ticket instead of a goodbye. When I boarded that flight, I kept hearing his voice, that low, distant tone he used when he spoke about legacy. "A man's worth," he once said, "isn't measured by what he leaves behind, but by what he hides." At the time, I thought it was just arrogance. Now, I wasn't so sure. The flight to Monaco felt endless. I watched the clouds roll beneath me like ghosts, the world disappearing into mist. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw his face. The stern gaze, the unreachable expression. I wondered what he was trying to tell me. When we landed in Nice, the sunlight was blinding, the Mediterranean glittering like glass. The air smelled of salt and jasmine. My phone buzzed with messages from Grant and Evelyn. Jokes, memes, photos of them celebrating their new empire. I turned the phone off and tossed it into my bag. At the terminal, a man stood with a sign that read, Mr. Miles Rowan. He didn't smile. "You're with me, sir," he said, his accent French, clipped and professional. We drove in silence along the coast. Cliffs on one side, the open sea on the other. The road wound like a silver ribbon through paradise. I should have felt peace. Instead, I felt watched. The driver's eyes flicked toward me in the mirror every so often, as if studying me. When we reached Monaco, I saw it. A villa of glass and stone perched above the marina, sunlight reflecting off its sharp edges. The gates opened soundlessly, like they already knew who I was. Every day that passed, I prepared in silence. I met with Edward's loyal employees, men and women who remembered the way he ran things before greed crept in. I assured them the company's heart wasn't gone, merely misplaced. Slowly, quietly, I built alliances. When Clara mocked me for playing with the old paperwork, I just smiled. She didn't realize I was rewriting her future. The day of the will reading arrived wrapped in cold sunlight, the kind of day that looks bright but feels empty. Clara entered the lawyer's office dressed for victory. Cream blazer, diamond earrings, a confidence that could light a room. Her sisters followed, radiant and smug. They laughed as they settled into their seats, whispering about what they'd buy first. The lawyer began reading. The smaller assets, the lake house, the cars, the art collections went first. Their smiles grew wider. Then he paused, cleared his throat. "Actually," he said, adjusting his glasses, "per Mr. Langford's secondary trust amendment, controlling interest in Langford Industries transfers to the named executor of his personal estate, Mr. Daniel Hayes." The room froze. Clara blinked, her face twitching in disbelief. What does that mean?" she stammered. "It means," Harold replied evenly, "your husband owns the company. You and your sisters inherit non-voting shares. In short, Mrs. Hayes, he's your boss." The silence that followed was deafening. The confidence drained from Clara's face. Her sisters turned on her instantly, whispering, then accusing, then shouting. I sat still, quiet, watching. Their laughter, the one that had cut me earlier, was gone now, swallowed by panic. The lawyer slid a folder across the table. "Congratulations, Mr. Hayes. Your father-in-law spoke very highly of your loyalty." I took it without a smile. No satisfaction, just a nod. Clara's voice trembled. You planned this." I met her eyes and said quietly, "No, he did. I just didn't stop him." The weeks that followed were chaos. The sisters tried to fight it, of course. Screaming lawyers, forged documents, desperate phone calls. But the paper trail was clear, the signatures hers. Every attempt to undo what she'd done only tightened the knot she'd tied around herself. I didn't gloat. I didn't need to. Watching them realize that their greed had built my throne was satisfaction enough. At night, Clara's laughter was gone. She'd sit in silence, staring at the wall, her wine untouched. Sometimes she'd glance at me like she was seeing a ghost. Maybe she was the ghost of the man she thought she could humiliate and outlive. One night, I drove out to the farmhouse Edward had left me. It was raining again. Soft, steady, cleansing. The kind of rain that erases footsteps and memories. The farmhouse wasn't much. Peeling paint, creaky floors, the faint smell of soil and rain-soaked wood. But it was mine. And in its quiet, I found something I hadn't felt in years. Peace. I walked through the rooms, running my hand along the furniture. The photographs, the traces of a life built on work instead of vanity. In the corner of the old study sat Edward's leather chair. I ran my hand over the worn armrest. For the first time in years, I let myself feel it, the weight of everything. The betrayal, the loss, the justice. He had seen them for who they were long before I did. And in the end, he left it all to the one person who stayed when there was nothing left to gain. The next morning, I walked the fields behind the house. The sky was wide and gray, the heir sharp and honest. I thought about how money changes people, how power reveals who they've always been. Clara used to say, "Money changes people." She was right. It didn't change me. It revealed me. In the city, they still whispered about me. The quiet man who became an empire overnight. Some called it luck. Others called it manipulation. But Edward would have called it loyalty. The board learned quickly that silence was not weakness. They respected me in the way people respect inevitability. Weeks later, Clara showed up at the farmhouse. The car tires crunched against the gravel. She stepped out, dressed simply, no makeup, no jewelry. The first time I'd ever seen her stripped of her armor. She stood at the edge of the porch, staring at me. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The wind carried the faint scent of rain. "You really did it," she whispered. "You actually took everything." I looked at her, the woman who once thought I was beneath her, who measured worth in dollars and names, and said, "No, Clara, you gave it away." Her eyes filled with something, not regret, not anger, something emptier. "I loved you," she said weakly.
No, Irraplia.
"You loved winning." She didn't argue. She just turned and walked back to her car. For a brief second, I thought I saw tears. Then she was gone. I watched her drive away until the sound of the engine disappeared into the distance. That night, I sat on the porch again. The moon hung low, casting pale light across the fields. In my hand, the deed to Langford Industries caught the silver glow. I thought about Edward, about the night he told me I was the only one who still saw him. I wished I'd said more that night, that I'd told him what he meant. So I whispered it then, to the wind, to the fields, to the ghost of the man who had seen something in me no one else did. "Thank you." And for the first time in years, I meant every word. Then I went inside, closed the door behind me, and finally, quietly, took care of her, too. Not with anger, not with revenge, but with the same precision she once used to mock me. The divorce papers were ready, her access to the accounts revoked. The world that once revolved around her name simply stopped. By morning, Clara Langford Hayes was no one. As dawn broke over the fields, I sat at Edward's old desk. Sunlight filtered through the dusty curtains, catching the edge of the framed company seal hanging on the wall. Langford Industries. It wasn't just a name anymore. It was proof that loyalty outlives arrogance, that patience cuts deeper than power. I wasn't born into wealth. I wasn't raised for empire. But I understood something they never did. The quiet moments build empires louder than any boardroom. Outside, the wind moved through the grass like a whisper. I imagined Edward's voice in it, proud, content. And as the day began, I knew I hadn't stolen his legacy. I had preserved it. The laughter that once humiliated me had turned to silence. And in that silence, I found everything I was ever meant to be. You just heard a story of betrayal, survival, and quiet revenge. If it left you thinking, hit like, share it forward, and subscribe for more true emotional stories that'll stay with you long after they end. Every click helps another story find its voice.